Well, welcome everybody. My name is Joe Noriel. I'm president of the History Connection, and on behalf of the Vietnam veterans of Chapter 563, we're extremely proud to have you all here today. Certainly a very special day in the city of Petaluma as we welcome the Vietnam Memorial Traveling Wall to our community. I'd like to get started with the Pledge of Allegiance, and I'd like to introduce Cleve Assad from the VVA Chapter 563.
Please stand. Face the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, with liberty and justice for all.
And now I'd like to welcome Katja Willigis to sing the national anthem.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rockets regular, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave.
Katja is a junior at Petaluma High School, and I think she's going to be our next American Idol. That's my prediction. At this point, I'd like to welcome Mr. Dwayne Soges, our chaplain, for the invocation.
Welcome to the Petaluma Vietnam Veterans Chapter 563, home of the brave and the center of the military universe. Thank you for all your attendance here today as we acknowledge the service and the sacrifices of the Vietnam veterans and their families. As we honor and welcome home our veterans, we rededicate this monument, acknowledging the Vietnam-era service of those who gave their time, talent, and some of them their lives in defense of our freedom and our way of life. General Ordonero, current Chief of Staff, summed it up by saying, "Our Army is the strength of our nation. Soldiers are the strength of our Army, and the families are the strength of our soldiers." This statement was proven true to now and proven true to our generations since our nation's birth. There is also clear and convincing evidence that our local community is the strength of the family, and it is the community that provides support to educate our children and to help them when times are tough. We cannot enjoy a more supportive community than ours. They indeed are our strength. We are blessed as Americans to enjoy many freedoms and opportunities others only dream about. Freedom to travel, to worship, to obtain an education, to speak, to own property, the freedom to vote, and the many other freedoms we have. But we must remember that these freedoms are not free. There is a price and a payment. The payment was paid by the soldiers in combat, by their blood, and by the blood of the fallen comrade. And to the spouses paid by their prayers and their tears shed at home in hope of their loved ones who would return safely and soon. To others, it's paid by the last full measure of their lives in defense of our freedom. So today, we rededicate this monument in Lucchesi Park. This wall of remembrance to remember the services, the sacrifice, and the death of our veterans. This wall was dedicated in 1985 in Arlington National Cemetery. Many of you have passed it by many times. Today, we will honor this wall day and night and remember all those who died and remain missing. In closing, to all you veterans, thank you for your service and your sacrifices and all that you endured to defend our way of life. To all the families, we thank you for all your prayers and steadfast hope. To all our veterans, welcome home. Job well done. Glad to have you home. Soldiers, tell your stories. Now, may the good Lord bless you all, bless you for your service, and may He continue to bless these United States of America, community strong, family strong, and America strong. Thank you.
I'd like to welcome VVA 563 President Breeze Baker.
Good afternoon and welcome. And one of the things I would like to do first is thank everyone who came out this morning to help put the wall up. It was done so magnificently and so quick, so thank you so very much. What I'm going to do is give a little bit of history of the wall. Vietnam veteran John Devitt of Stockton, California, attended the 1982 dedication ceremonies of the Vietnam Veterans Memorial. Recognizing what he saw as a healing nature of the wall, he vowed to make a transportable vision of the wall, a traveling wall. So those who could not make it to Washington, D.C. would be able to see and touch the names of friends or loved ones in their own hometown. Using personal finances, Devitt founded Veterans Combat Veterans Limited with the help of friends. The half-size replica of the Vietnam Veterans Memorial, named the Moving Wall, was built and first put on display in public in Tyler, Texas. You have to excuse me just a minute. The Moving Wall visited hundreds of small towns and cities throughout the U.S., staying 5 or 6 days at each of the local arrangements of each visit are made months in advance by veterans organizations and other civic groups. Thousands of people all over the U.S. volunteer their time and their money to help honor the fallen. Desire for a hometown visit of the Moving Wall was so high that the waiting list became very, very long. Vietnam combat veterans built a second structure of the Moving Wall. A third structure was added in 1989 and in 2001. One of the structures was retired due to wear. By 2006, there had been more than 1,000 hometowns visited of the Moving Wall. The count of people who visited the Moving Wall at each display ranges from 5,000 or more. More than 50,000, the total estimates of visitors is in the tens of millions. As the wall moves from town to town on the interstates and the highways, it is often escorted by the state troopers and up to thousands of local citizens on motorcycles. Many of these are Patriot Guard riders. who consider escorting the moving wall to be a special mission, which is coordinated on their website, as it passes towns even when it's not planning to stop in these towns. The local veteran organizations sometimes plan for local citizens to gather by the highway and across overpasses to wave and salute the wall. And this is the history of the wall. Thank you.
Dignitaries, would you like to have a seat? As you can imagine, putting something like this together is not an easy task, and the next gentleman I'm going to introduce was very much a big part of making this happen. He's Vice Commander, AMVETS of Sonoma County, U.S. Army Combat Engineer, and most certainly a Veterans Advocate. I would like to introduce Mr. Vince Marengo.
Thank you, Joe. Welcome, everyone. Good afternoon. It's good to see there's a great turnout today, and we have the lovely weather here in Sonoma County that we so enjoy. As an opening remark, I have the privilege of introducing the guest speakers and guest of honors to all of you this afternoon. Before I do that, I would like to just mention, for those of you that were expecting 4-star General Hearney to be here, he became immobile, and he sent his deepest regrets and his highest admiration for everyone and everybody who has worked so hard to bring this forward today. So congratulations to all of you from him. So what I'll be doing right now is there will be 5 guest speakers that I'll call up individually, followed by, in conclusion, the offices of Congress, Senate, and Assembly, to make a brief closing remark at the end. Additionally, what we do as veterans is we honor our dignitaries and our guest of honors with the military handshake and a challenge coin, which there'll be 2 presented to all of those sitting up here with me currently. My brother Claudio Calvo, who has advocated for active duty military veterans in Sonoma County and Marin County, all I can say is he is just remarkable, and he has done as much as anyone to help his fellow veterans and future generations, as well as his own. He, along with John McGivney from the VVA chapter, will be doing the handshakes. So after your presentations, please do shake the hands of Brother Claudio and Brother John McGivney. As a courtesy, Brother Claudio, although you're a Marine, would you like to say a few words? I guess, is that okay with everybody? I mean, he's Marines. Okay.
That's correct. I'm not a soldier. I'm a Marine. I'm Claudio Calvo, the local Veterans Employment Representative for EDD for the state of California. I represent them in Sonoma and Marin County. I'm also a Vietnam combat veteran with the United States Marine Corps. Proud of it. Once upon a time, I introduced Vince to the challenge coin. I did a little bit of research. There's a lot of stories about challenge coin, but one that in particular that I really enjoy, it was actually originated back in the first war to end all wars. And what happened was a battalion that was lost was making it back to their lines, but they didn't come back to their own line, and they didn't have passwords. So they were challenged at the line by a U.S. Army outfit, and before they can get to the safety, they had to present something. So one of the soldiers that was trying to get through tossed the coin to the sentry, looked at the coin, and noticed the battalion. and let them through. And the challenge coins is actually all about, it progressed into whoever throws down their first challenge coin doesn't have to buy drinks at the bar. But we progressed. Here in Sonoma County, we present our challenge coin to honor these representatives and to our fellow veterans for the job well done. Thank you.
Okay, and those challenge coins will be two Vietnam Veterans of America, both chapters 563 and 223. Okay, just to get started here, I first must thank our host, Joe Noriel, and the History Connection, the American Veterans Traveling Tribute, and the City of Petaluma in providing this forum for our community and a means of coming together to honor, respect, remember, and as Commander Parker said last year at his tribute, where are you, Commander Parker? There he is, right there. He added two words, and he put it very gracefully: respect, remember, honor, and educate, and heal. And heal. I want to emphasize that. Those who have given the ultimate sacrifice for their country, and again, to educate all to the true nature of the cost of freedom. I would like to also acknowledge and thank all of our elected offices of our district for being represented here this afternoon, either personally or by representation. I can formally tell you they are all sitting up here on both sides of me. So thank you to them for being here and supporting us. Also, the proud community sponsors. You'll see a board at the end of the wall with all those names proudly listed. The many Sonoma County Veterans Service Organizations, volunteers, as I mentioned, the Vietnam Veterans of America, both chapters, 563 and 223, and specifically the active military and all veterans for bringing this forward today. So thank you very much for that. Today we recognize the extraordinary sacrifice made by all who have served in our country's armed forces and defended her. We are grateful for the dedication of those who protect the freedoms that we all hold very dear, especially the brave soldiers who have died in the line of duty or are missing in action from all wars and conflicts, and specifically the Vietnam heroes recorded on this wall behind me, on the tribute wall behind me today. We must also take this time to appreciate the many sacrifices made by the resilient families of our military men and women. There are, just real briefly, just as informational, there are 9 casualty categories the United States of America has used to track during and subsequent to the Vietnam War. And as of the 2013 census, all the names on the Washington, D.C. memorial are also replicated here on this wall, which will stand tall here over the next 4 days. Finally, let us continue to pray to God and pay our due respects to all veterans, active duty military, police officers, firefighters, and anyone whose daily jobs put themselves in harm's way to protect and defend our way of life in locations around the world or here on the home front. Now I'd like to bring forward some other speakers that have something much more interesting than I to add. Our first guest speaker is a gentleman who has served city and county government for many years. He has been a steadfast advocate for all of our veterans' programs and activities. He is my colleague. He is your district supervisor. Please welcome the chairman of the board, Supervisor David Rabbit.
Thank you all so much. Thank you, Vince. And I do want to make a correction. Vince said that the dignitaries are certainly sitting, with all due respect to my fellow electeds and staff. We all know that the dignitaries in this setting are those men and women in uniform today with us and those veterans out there. So thank you very much. I do want to thank the Vietnam Veterans of America, both 563 and 223. I want to thank the History Connection. I want to thank Vince Marengo from AmVets Post 40 as well. And I want to thank everyone for being here. And I do want to call out Michelle Whitman, who's here from Supervisor Shirley Zane's office, and I appreciate her being here representing my colleague Shirley. Thank you, Michelle. You know, as an architect, I very much appreciate the built environment, and behind us what we really see is what started out to be just a structure. And I want to give a little history of that and tell you a few things that perhaps not everyone knows. In 1981, a 21-year-old Chinese-American woman who only the year before graduated with an architectural degree from Yale, she won the public design competition for the Vietnam Veterans Memorial. And her design was selected over 1,441 others submitted for consideration. And the design, as you see behind me, was incredibly simple. It was really, the design concept was to create an opening or a wound in the earth to symbolize the gravity of the loss of the soldiers. The simple black granite in the shape of a shallow V, with one side pointing towards the Lincoln Monument, or Memorial, and the others toward the Washington Monument. 58,253 names of fallen soldiers carved in its face. You know, and at the time, some thought the design to be too simple. It wasn't dignified enough. It was too unconventional. There wasn't a statue. There wasn't a horse. It just wasn't what people were used to as war memorials. Some even criticized the heritage of the designer. And Lynn, at 21, had to go to Congress and actually defend the design in front of that body. And even then, James Watt, the Secretary of Interior under President Ronald Reagan, initially refused to sign the building permit to construct the wall because of the public outcry. But eventually, and within a few years, the memorial was completed and opened to the public. And I think we all know what happened then. It really did immediately become a pilgrimage site. It became a place of mourning, a place of remembrance, a place of reverence, and, as Vince said, a place of healing. And many have considered the wall to be the most emotional war memorial ever designed and built. And that simple design, with the color and contrast of the names, the siding, the slopes of the walkway, and the wall itself all add to the experience. But it is seeing those 58,000 names etched on the wall that truly hits you the hardest. It's understanding that each name was an individual whose life was cut short. We dream of what they could have been, what they would have added to all of our well-being. And we know that behind every name, there's a mother, a father, brothers, sisters, and friends. And we learn in a very simple but so powerful way that war, that conflict has an incredible cost. And to those who served, and to those who serve, thank you. And I hope everyone who visits this exhibit can dwell on the memories and sacrifices of those names they see, and remember all of our brave men and women who have served us in the past and continue to serve us today and into the future. And I appreciate very much the opportunity to be here today. The board did pass unanimously at its last board meeting a resolution honoring and acknowledging this memorial and the work of those who brought it here today And I thank all of you for being here, and I thank those who are responsible for this. God bless you.
Thank you, Supervisor Rabbit. Our next guests are from the city of Petaluma. Gosh, you know, I've known Councilman Mike Healy and Mike Harris for so long. I lost track of the terms. I stopped counting after 3. They've been our advocates and your representatives for a very, very long time. I could say that they've always been as well advocates of veterans and the active duty military. And I'm so proud that that the city is here as well to honor this tribute and all of you. At this time, I'd like for you to please welcome Councilman Mike Healy and Councilman Mike Harris.
Thank you, Vince. It's 4 terms, actually. But who's counting? You know, there's a reason why at the Butter and Eggs Parade every year the loudest applause is for the Vietnam veterans walking through. And it's always a very emotional moment. And it's a recognition that Americans owe an incredible debt of gratitude to all of the soldiers who went to Vietnam, those who came back and those who didn't. And there's no one to whom we owe a greater debt of gratitude than to those whose names are on the wall behind us here. I've had the privilege of seeing the permanent monument on the National Mall. As Supervisor Rabbit said, it is an incredibly moving experience. This traveling wall is no less moving than the permanent wall back in Washington, D.C. So I'm going to stop here. My colleague, Councilmember Harris, has a proclamation from the city to read to you, and thank you all for being here.
Thank you, and thank you, Mr. Healy. It's my honor to read a proclamation from the city of Petaluma dedicating today as Vietnam Veterans Day on October 10th, 2013. And I'll read it. Whereas we honor the more than 3 million Americans who served, we pay tribute to those who have laid rest, we reaffirm our dedication to showing a generation of veterans the respect and support they deserve. And whereas Americans from every corner of our nation left the warmth of family to serve the country they loved, they won every major battle of the war and upheld the highest traditions of our armed forces. And whereas our veterans answered our country's call and served with honor, and on March 29th, 1973, the last of our troops left Vietnam, and thousands returned home bearing shrapnel and scars. Still more were even burdened by the invisible wounds of post-traumatic stress, of Agent Orange, of memories that would never fade. And whereas more than 58,000 laid down their lives in service to our nation, and now and forever, their names are etched into 2 faces of granite, a lasting memorial to those who bore the conflict's greatest costs. And whereas, in one of the war's most profound tragedies, many of these men and women came home to be shunned or neglected, to face treatment unbefitting their courage and a welcome of unworthy of their example, and we must never let this happen again. And whereas the last half a century, after those helicopters swept off the ground and into the annals of history, we pay tribute to the following: the missing, the wounded, the millions who served, and the millions who awaited their return. And today we reaffirm one of our most fundamental obligations: to show all who have worn the uniform of the United States the respect and dignity they deserve, and to honor their sacrifice by serving them as well as they served us. Now, therefore, be it resolved that David Glass, Mayor of Petaluma, along with the members of the City Council, do hereby proclaim October 10th, 2013 as Vietnam Veterans Day in the city of Petaluma. Our nation stands stronger for their service, and on Vietnam Veterans Day, we honor their proud legacy with our deepest gratitude. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman. Our next guest speaker is truly an American hero. Although he needs no introduction, I will give him respectfully a brief introduction. He is a Major General in the United States Army Reserve. He is the Deputy Wartime Commanding General. He is, the Deputy Commanding General of the 8th Army, Yongsan, Korea. He is also a presiding Superior Court judge here in Sonoma County. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my high honor and privilege to introduce to you General Gary Medvedgy.
I had prepared comments. I've left them at my seat, and probably you'll thank me for that. So first of all, thank you very much for that introduction, but to paraphrase, the heroes are those among us that we're here to honor, those in uniform out there, those reflected on the wall behind me, and all those Vietnam veterans out in the audience today, as well as every other conflict. As I shook people's hands, just about every conflict we've been in the last 70 years is represented out in this audience. They are the heroes. Please shake their hand and please give them a round of applause right now. So most of the comments I had prepared were covered by other speakers. It's a beautiful day, but I know the sun is beating on you, and you would like to, in the words of the paper, which I thought were great, touch the wall and let it touch you. That's why we're here, to remember those that fell during that conflict, but also, once again, to heartily thank each of those Vietnam veterans who are among us today. I'm not one. I was still in high school when that conflict was raging. I lived through those very tumultuous times. And for those young people that are here, I'm glad to see you here. And that's the lesson for you to learn. America was absolutely in chaos domestically. There was no domestic tranquility back then. And those veterans, those soldiers, airmen, Marines, Coast Guardmen, Navymen, that fought in that war, they fought for one another, they fought for their nation, they fought for the communities, and they were spat upon when they came home. That should never happen again. And that's what you need to know. The last 12 years, the conflict that we've been on, I know we've got some Afghani and Iraqi freedom veterans here. They received a different welcome. They were thanked for their service. And that is so important, coming back from a war zone to come back to your communities. Every one of them during that Vietnam era was not welcomed. I just want to tell you one anecdote, because I suffered 20 years later. I was assigned in San Francisco. I was actually going to a meeting with then Mayor Dianne Feinstein, walking in uniform downtown San Francisco, getting yelled at and jeered at. 20 years after the war. Those are sad times for America. To paraphrase George Washington, our first commander-in-chief, he really had it right in telling all Americans that the willingness of people to volunteer, to step forward, even if drafted to serve, the willingness for them to defend our nation, our lifeblood, depends on how you treat those veterans before. And there's so much truth to that. So this event is important, and I love Petaluma because you do it best. You are standing up for your Veterans Day parades, these memorials, your history events. So thank you to all those, the civilian leadership and those that took care of the details, large and small, to put this event on so we could all come together and remember those veterans and those who gave their all during the Vietnam era. Now, a couple other points I want to make that related to that. You know, I have a government-issued BlackBerry in my role as a reserve general officer. There was a quote by our Chief of Staff, General Odiarno, earlier in this proceeding. We, every day, every week, every time there's a suicide or casualty in the Army, I get an immediate flash news report. Just a few days ago, I received my 200th suicide, and that's just in the Army alone. There are many among us who are suffering today, post 9/11, from the conflicts and from the service that they're giving to their nation. The Veterans Administration is doing a great job. They're doing their all. But we really need to come together as a community and recognize the price that our veterans pay. And when I include the veterans, I include their families. We had mention of the thanks to the families. Anyone that serves, and those etched in stone behind us were children. We're future parents that never got to be. Brothers and sisters, relatives, they came from communities like this one. They need to be remembered, and you need to take care of the veterans today. If you look at all the casualty figures from all of our nation's conflicts, California has paid a huge price in its treasure, as has Sonoma County and Petaluma. These are important thoughts for each of us to remember. I know those of you who are here kind of preaching to the choir, but please talk to your neighbors, talk to your children, talk to their children. Let them know that families out there are serving too. When you're a member of the military, the whole family is. And they are serving and suffering too. So thank you for this day. Thank you to those veterans from the Vietnam War. Thank you from all those who made it today and really went out of their way to get here. From Korea, I got to meet a Korean War veteran, and I will tell you, he fought on Pork Chop Hill. I walked that ground a few years ago. It's tough ground to fight. Vietnam, one of the most god-awful places in the world to fight. From the monsoons, the humidity, the heat, the bugs, the poisonous snakes. I got to visit Vietnam as part of a military trip. I didn't fight there. I was too young. But what a horrendous place. The deprivation of all those that fought there are unimaginable. So please seek them out in this audience today and thank them. And thank each of you for taking the time out of your day today to come. I'm very honored to be here. Thank you very much.
Okay, we still have two more speakers, and well, he's a brother in arms. He's a staunch advocate. He does a lot of good, hard work for active duty military and veterans throughout Sonoma County and Marin County and probably elsewhere that I don't know of. He first joined the Marines in 1964 as an officer candidate. In 1967, he was commissioned as a second lieutenant upon graduating from UCSF. He served proudly in Vietnam from 1968 to 1969 as an artillery officer. He retired in 1993 as a lieutenant colonel. Please welcome Colonel Sonny Campbell.
I'm humbled here today, standing in front of this wall,
because in Vietnam, those guys were up where you were, and I was behind. Good afternoon, veterans and guests. It is truly an honor to be here today to honor all veterans who made the ultimate sacrifice in support of the values we all cherish: God, freedom, and country. I salute the various veterans organizations represented here today who will not let us forget our fallen servicemen and women. My family and I have been residents of Sonoma County for 37 years, and our 4 sons attended high school here at St. Vincent, so we're very well aware of Petaluma and love your welcoming. One of my fellow officers, Jim Webb, Naval Academy graduate and Marine officer, also served as Secretary of the Navy as a U.S. Senator for Virginia. He wrote this: "My experience was that few who served during Vietnam ever complained. The men who fought World War II were their heroes and role models. They honored their father's service by emulating it and largely agreed with their father's wisdom in attempting to stop communism to reach Southeast Asia. The most accurate poll of the attitudes of these vets showed that 91% were glad they served their country, and 74% enjoyed their time in service, and 89% agreed with the statement, 'Our troops were asked to fight a war which our political leaders would not let us win.' Here are some other facts. 9 million men and women served in the military during Vietnam, 3 million of whom were part of the Vietnam Theater. And contrary to popular mythology, 2/3 were volunteers, and 73% of those who died were also volunteers. So we knew what we were getting into. Dropped into an enemy's terrain 12,000 miles away from home, many American citizen soldiers performed with tenacity and quality that may never truly be understood. Those who believe that the war was fought incompletely on a tactical level should consider Hanoi's recent admission that 1.4 million of its soldiers died on the battlefield compared to 58,000 of total U.S. dead. Those who believe that it was a dirty little war where the bombs did all the work might contemplate that it was the most costly war the United States Marine Corps has ever fought. 5 times as many died as in World War I, 3 times died as in Korea, and more total killed and wounded than any in all in World War II. A few years after I came back, a lot of the statistics were coming out, and I was almost astounded, and it had never been part of it, that 5,000 Marines died in 1968, the year that I was primarily in Vietnam. What is a hero? My heroes are the young men and women who faced the issues of war and possible death, and then weighed those concerns against obligations to their country. Citizen soldiers who interrupted their personal and professional lives at their most formative stage, who suffered loneliness, disease, wounds with an open, contagious spirit. In the Marine Corps, we call that Semper Fi, or gun-ho. Women have also played a major and significant role in our military history. Dating back to the Revolutionary War, they used disguises and wits to outsmart the British. In the Civil War, women acted as saboteurs, spies, and soldiers. Lieutenant Mary Walker, a surgeon, was awarded the Congressional Medal of Honor for heroism. In World War I, 50,000 women served mainly as nurses. In World War II, over 350,000 served in all branches. Approximately 10,000 women served in the Vietnam War, with 10 of those women giving their lives for their country. Today, over 225,000 women serve in the military and are currently being integrated into the combat roles. Those who served in Vietnam deserve a better and far better place in history than they sometimes are offered. In the rifle companies, we spent endless months patrolling ridgelines, villages, mountains, far away from any notion of tents, barbed wire, hot food, or electricity. Our luxuries were limited to what we could fit in our pack. We moved through the boiling heat with 60 pounds of weapons and gear, causing a typical Marine to lose 20% of his body weight while in the bush. When we stopped, we dug chest-high fighting holes, slit trenches for toilets. We slept on the ground under our makeshift poncho hooches. And when it rained, we usually took our hooches down because the wet ponchos could be seen in the evening when illumination flares would go up our enemy. Sleep itself was fitful. Never more than an hour or two in a stretch for months at a time when we mixed daytime patrolling with nighttime ambushes, listening posts, foxhole duty, radio watches. Wingworm, hookworm, malaria, dysentery were common, as was trench foot when the monsoons came in. When I remember these days and the very young men I served with, I am continually amazed, for these were mostly recent civilians. Barely out of high school and called up from the cities and farms to do their year in hell and return. These visions haunt me every day, and not of the nightmares of war, but the steady consistency which these Marines face with their responsibilities and uncompromising, most of them, in the face of danger. Yes, I'm a Marine, but I would honestly say in the last 5 years and being part of 223, I've learned to love and understand the respect that our other brothers and sisters did in Vietnam, and I hold them in the same regard as I do as a Marine. The unnerving skill of the young squad leaders as we moved through the unfamiliar villages, weed-choked trails in the black of night. The quick certainty when a fellow Marine was wounded and needed help, their willingness to risk their own lives to save other Marines in peril. To this day, it stuns me that our own countrymen have so completely missed the story of their service, lost in the bitter confusion of the war itself. It has been my privilege to keep up with many of them over the years since we all came home. One finds in them very little bitterness about the war in which they fought. The most common regret, almost to a man, is that they were not able to do more for each other and for the people they helped. It would be redundant to say that I would trust my life with these men, because I've already have, in more ways than I can ever count. I am alive today because of their quiet, unaffected heroism. Such valor epitomizes the conduct of Americans at war for the first days of our existence. But today we have a new mission. That mission today is we have to be ready to assist the new veteran who is coming home from Iraq and Afghanistan. These men and women need a hand up, not a handout. I challenge you to listen to them and then let them know it's okay if they hurt and that they left a buddy in the battlefield. They did not fail their mission. Confirm that they did their job honorably. This morning I paid a visit to the Vietnam Veterans Trail in Annandale State Park. There is a bronze plaque there with the following inscription. It's a message from the 119 sons of the Rebel Empire who lost their lives in the Vietnam War. Quote, "We gave our lives. It is for you, the living, to give our deaths meaning. We were young, we have died, remember us." Thank you all. It was a pleasure talking to you today. Semper Fidelis.
All right, our last guest of honor speaker, but certainly she's not last in line. This is going to be a little heartfelt. She is a woman of high honor. She is the Gold Star mother of Corporal Joshua Canuck of the United States Army 3rd Infantry Division, who was killed in action on 1 October 2005 in Iraq. She's one of many families here in Sonoma County that were affected. Josh graduated from just down the street here, at Casa Grande High School in the class of 2000. Everyone, please, if you could, a very warm welcome for Gold Star Mother Linda Canuck.
Thank you. I guess I get to give the mother's touch. As Vince mentioned, my son Joshua Kynock was killed in combat in Beiji, Iraq, and his name is forever etched on the Iraq-Afghanistan panels that are currently traveling with AVTT. We are here today to honor those names of all the fallen etched on these walls behind me. I never in my life imagined I might be standing in front of anyone to share such an experience as a Gold Star mother. This year, October 1, marked the 8th year that my precious son has been gone. And I still have trouble getting my head around the fact that my son's name is forever etched in history. What a mind-boggling realization to know Josh took part in the Iraq War and is now memorialized throughout our nation permanently and is in the company of the Vietnam veterans of this replica wall, as well as all other wars. There are unknown names that may be sitting or standing amongst us today, who were those who stood in harm's way to extract and care for the wounded and the fallen. For every fallen or wounded soldier, there were and are at least 2 or 3 more helping to remove them from the battle, to receive care for their wounds, or the care to get them shipped home in a way none of us like to think about. In my personal experience, I have no idea how many people were involved in the extraction and care of returning my son to me, but I can tell you this much: I'm eternally grateful to them. If this dedication were to include all the names that have been touched by wars, it would be endless. I'd like to share a piece of a story from a dear friend and his experience of the care that he received and what it meant to him and how grateful he is to be alive today through the care that he received. My dear friend Randy served in Vietnam under the 101st Airborne L Company at Camp Eagle as a LRP, Long Range Reconnaissance Patrol. LRPs preceded what we know today as Rangers. LRPs were jungle fighters, and each mission was extremely dangerous, as all battles are. However, they were in the jungles by themselves in 6-man teams. These 6-man teams knew they would return to base with 1 man killed and 2 wounded. And next to those 3 were at least 6 more standing by or entering the combat zone, ready to give the necessary care required. And that would have been the men helping to extract and the women helping to extract the nurses. Throughout his career, Randy had been involved in 113 hand-to-hand combat missions and firefights. Around 1971 in the Ashaw Valley, better known as the Valley of Death, Randy was involved in one hand-to-hand combat mission where he was officially wounded. The Ashaw Valley proved to be the battle that would change that for Randy. His left bicep had been split open, and unbeknownst to him, he also had a puncture wound to his abdomen. It was his buddy and the nurse taking him out of the combat zone who discovered in the helicopter that he had blood running down his boots. He had a punctured appendix as well, and many other wounds. Later that year, healed and back in the battle, his mission was at the Rung Rung Valley at Lam Sung 719er push into Laos. This was a fairly famous battle. This is the battle that took him out of the war. His wounds were extensive, and he began a different sort of battle with his spirit. I've known Randy for 15 plus years, and he knew my son well. Through the years, Randy and I had had conversations about his time in Nam, but he had never shared the details until I was preparing this speech, and I told him it was important to me to share something my son couldn't. This time, hearing his story, I could relate in such a more profound way. Randy believes that the knowledge and training he received is only part of what saved him. Randy has memories of what he terms the angels of mercy. The nurses standing by near the combat zone to pull him out, and the nurses tending to his physical wounds. But Randy feels the nurses tended to much more than his physical wounds. When Randy speaks of the experience of his battles, it's with pride and honor. But when he speaks of his angels of mercy, it takes on a whole new spirit of tending to his soul. He particularly recalled the young Southern gal who would stroke his head and face and tell him, "God will heal you," and she gave him reasons to live. There are countless stories of all our brave men and women, just like my friend Randy and my son Josh. And what they don't know is that they're indelibly etched into the hearts of those who've served and their families. Yes, we have the physical and emotional wounds of war, and we must never forget nor leave anyone behind, including those survivors who need our love and care. I believe it is our duty to stand beside these incredibly courageous people and never give up on them. They are suffering from war's atrocities and should not bear this alone. I wanted to share this with a personal touch and not statistics, because this is my way of honoring all our service members by letting them speak and truly listening. On behalf of myself, a Gold Star mother, I would like to express my appreciation and thanks to all those men and women who aren't acknowledged as often as they deserve and who are an integral part in military service, past and present. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Linda. At this time, I'm going to go ahead and call up each of the representatives for the elected offices to present and perhaps say a few words on behalf of their representatives. Starting with Congressman Jared Huffman, who has always been a staunch advocate of everything that we do. And inside and outside his district, he is always there. He's a mirror David Rabbit. He is always, Supervisor Rabbit, he is always there whenever we need his help. And so is Val Cartwright. Val, please, if you come to the podium.
Such an honor to be here. Thank you so much for having me in Jared's place today. I'm just going to read the certificate that I have for you all. Certificate of Special Congressional Recognition presented to History Connection and Vietnam Veterans of America, Chapter 563. Presented to honor the special occasion of the opening ceremony for the Traveling Vietnam Memorial Wall in Petaluma, California. Thanks to the History Connection and the Vietnam Veterans of America, Chapter 563, this special memorial will serve as an important reminder of all those who have given the ultimate sacrifice in defense of our country, and honor the commitment, dedication, and courage of all who served in Vietnam. Thank you so much.
On behalf of Congressman Mike Thompson's office, Sean, there you are. Please.
Thank you. As many of you know, the congressman himself is a Vietnam veteran. My grandfather is a veteran of the Korean War, and my father was too young to fight in Vietnam. He was in high school, such as the general. I hadn't had a Vietnam veteran in my life until I started working for Congressman Mike Thompson. And he taught me that the men and women who served during that time served with the highest integrity, and they lived with the highest integrity. And I'd just like to thank you all for everything you've done and for all of the names here on this wall. And we as well have a certificate of special recognition for the Vietnam Veterans of America, Chapter 563. And thank you very much for having us here today.
On behalf of Senator Walk, Tracy, please.
Good afternoon, everyone. Senator Wolk was hoping to be here today, but she was unable to, so she asked me to read a letter in her absence. Distinguished guests, I am so very sorry I am unable to join you today at the opening ceremony of the Traveling Vietnam Wall in Petaluma. The Traveling Wall allows the public to honor, respect, and remember the men and women who gave the ultimate sacrifice without traveling great distances. The Vietnam Veterans Memorial Wall in D.C., which I have visited and taken my children and grandchildren to, remains one of the most intense and unique memorials in our nation. Today is a day of reflection, remembrance, and to never forget the lessons we learned from the Vietnam War. We must always, always honor and respect the warriors for their service to their country. The impacts of war sometimes occur much later after discharge from service, and it is imperative that we provide our veterans with the care they need and they deserve. In addition to supporting our veterans, it is equally important to support the families because they too have sacrificed. I humbly thank our veterans for their service to our nation. Sincerely, Lois Wolk, Senator, 3rd District. Thank you so very much. And also, here is a certificate of recognition from both myself and Assemblymember Mark Levine, thanking and honoring History Connection, the Vietnam Veterans Chapter of 563, for bringing the memorial here. Thank you very much.
And last but not least, on behalf of Assemblymember Mark Levine, Stephanie Duff, please.
Good afternoon. I'm Stephanie Tuft, a field representative for State Assemblymember Mark Levine. Mark Levine regrettably cannot make it here today, and he's asked me to say just a few words because I know the sun is hot and we've been here for a while. Today, we remember the men and women of our armed forces who throughout our history have sacrificed their lives so that we might live in freedom. Much has been written about the Vietnam War and those difficult and complicated times. However, the message of this memorial is quite simple. These men and women fought for our freedom, brought honor to their communities, loved their country, and made the ultimate sacrifice in service of their nation. I believe this monument not only captures the memories and the sacrifices of the fallen, but I believe that it has also changed the way we think about the Vietnam War and those who serve today, and that change has greatly benefited our society. For far too many Vietnam-era vets, they came home to find that their courage, their valor, and their commitment were not honored or even recognized because they fought an unpopular war. We are now resolved to never let that happen again. We cannot thank today's vets enough for putting themselves in harm's way so that we can live a peaceful life here at home. Thank you.
That concludes my portion of the opening ceremony, and I'll turn the program back over to your host, Joe Noriel. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Vince. We can't forget today the prisoner of wars and the MIA, and I got a very special guest to speak on their behalf. My friend, my brother from VVA Chapter 223, Mr. Bruce Thompson.
Good afternoon. Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, veterans, their families of veterans, friends of veterans, and especially the grunts. Welcome. My name is Bruce Thompson. I'm a Vietnam veteran and a grunt. Though my Marine friend Steve
likes to remind me that I didn't hump in the boonies. I busted brush on a tank. I served with the 10th United States Cavalry in Vietnam, attached to the 4th Infantry Division in the Central Highlands. We worked the Ia Drang Valley. That was known as the Valley of Pain. Some statistics from October 7th, 2013. Total missing in action. World War II, 73,661. Korea, 7,903. The Cold War, 126. Vietnam, and this changes daily, 1,644. Iraq and other current conflicts, 6. Today I'm here to dedicate the Prisoner of War Missing in Action Memorial to my left, to your right. In commemoration of the extraordinary service of those fellow veterans who suffered, some giving their lives for the cause of justice, liberty, and freedom. Words cannot enhance their glory. They suffered and died for their country, for each other, and for us. We can best consecrate this occasion by rededicating ourselves to the unselfish service on the missing in action question and bring closure to the almost 1,700 families who still wait. I also dedicate this memorial to the memory of all our nation's defenders from all our wars. The memorial itself is bleak, sobering to look at. It's meant to be this way. Sonny gave us some statistics, I'm going to cover some more. Yeah, between August 1964 and May 1975, the Vietnam War years, 9.1 million people served. 2.6 million men and women went to Vietnam. 58,220 died there. Here they are. 303,644 were wounded. 153 of them were hospitalized. We had 766 prisoners of war in Vietnam, of which 114 died in captivity. $2,388 missing in action. 1,700 still unaccounted for. But with these statistics, 97% of Vietnam veterans had honorable discharges. And 87% of us hold our service in high esteem. We served proudly. Why did Joe ask me here today? I was wounded both going into the Ia Drang Valley and coming out. But it was the coming out one that stayed with me. And it's what fuels my passion for the missing in action POW issue. It was my last day in the field. I was short. We know that term. I was ready to go. Get on the Freedom Bird. Back to the world. That's what we called America, the world. Because Vietnam wasn't the world. I said goodbye to the guys, my platoon. Jumped on a convoy out of the oasis outside of Pleiku. We made it halfway into the division base camp. We were ambushed. It was kind of getting dark. The Viet Cong shot all 7 trucks off the road. I was shot as we crashed. Managed to crawl over some dead people. Get covered with their blood. Not so much mine. I was minorly wounded. When the Viet Cong converged on us, overran us, I dropped and played dead. I had 2 bullets left in my .45, and I got away with it. I laid there all night, prayed, my deal with God, get me through this. I'll go to church. I was a Catholic schoolboy. You know what? I go to church. I knew if I could make it through the night, I knew when the sun came up, the tanks would come. And that's exactly what happened. And as the sun came up and the tanks came down the road, about 5 of us jumped up out of the whole convoy, ran out to the tanks, and we made it. But that was it. As we worked our way through the wreckage, not one more American came out and showed his face. I know from the sounds I heard laying there that night, as the Viet Cong searched for us and found us and tortured us to death, that these bodies, these men, would never be recovered. And that's what fuels me. Like most Vietnam veterans, we owe it to these guys, these men and women, to do what we can and to be there for the men and women who serve today. Thank you.
You may know Petaluma was touched very personally by the Vietnam War. It lost 15 of its citizens. I'd like to invite Larry Finkel, VVA Chapter 563, to read their names.
Thank you, Joe. Before I do that, I'd just like to mention the rest of the schedule for the wall. Tomorrow will be Petaluma Remembered Day, and we are going to have a candlelight vigil at 8 o'clock tomorrow night. Saturday will be Purple Heart Day. We'll have ceremonies for that. And on Sunday, Women in Vietnam presentation. There's a lot of women that served over there that I don't think get the credit and the distinction that they deserve. There will also be a mobile blood bank here from Blood Banks of the Pacific on Sunday. So if you can, to be able to donate blood. I would also like to honor something personally. My grandfather, Ben Finkel, served in the 77th Division as a medic in World War I in France. My father, who is now a resident at the Yountville Veterans Home, served in World War II in the Merchant Marines. My granddaughter, Megan Bray, is now a yeoman second class in the United States Navy. So we come from a very, very full military background. And I would just like to honor the 15 brave Petaluma veterans who gave their all during the Vietnam conflict. Bill McConnell, Robert Fenton, Paul Schiff, Charles Dorman, Cameron Rice, Edsel Frick, Rodney Shipman, Thomas Stancliffe, Donald Carlisle, Charles Toiliette, Ken Huggins, Richard Walker, Larry Whitler, and Michael Auergan. Those brave men who gave their final devotion and gave their all for the people of this town and this community. Thank you.
In closing, I'd like to thank everyone very much for coming. I love Petaluma, and I'm going to tell you why. The reason this all happened was because of a terrible tragedy late last year. Many of you may or may not know we had a Vietnam memorial plaque stolen in one of our parks, and it was stolen for the scrap metal, and that touched a lot of people, not just in Petaluma, but all over the Bay Area, and people responded, and boy did they respond. That plaque was replaced. It was an amazing ceremony. But this wall being here today, that was the seed money. The leftovers were the contributions that led to this. And there's a lot of people all over the Bay Area that are responsible for this. And I certainly want to recognize the members of the Petaluma Fire Department who paid a big portion in that. Could we please get a round of applause for them? And also, most certainly, the volunteers from the Petaluma Coast Guard base who are out here promptly this morning, 8 o'clock, to help erect this thing. So thank you guys very much, and gals. And I'd like to close with the benediction, Mr. Dwayne Soges.
So let's take the liberty to pray for our Commander-in-Chief in heaven, our Papa. As we go our separate ways, we ask you to help and guide us through all the coming days. Be with us and protect us. We thank you for your loving care and all your many blessings. Go with us, dear Lord, as we part. See each one of us safely home and lighten up our hearts. This we pray. So may the good Lord bless you and keep you. May he make his face shine upon you and be gracious unto you. May he lift up the light of his countenance upon you and give you peace all the days of your life. And this we all pray and say, Amen. Thank you.
Come on back to you, Mama. Well, yes, I would. But I am missing. Be there if I could. Well, you know I'd come on back to you, girl. Yes, I would. But I'm still missing. Be there if I could. Well, sometimes I'm in the jungle with no daisies on my grave. And sometimes I'm in Bangkok, baby, with a needle sticking out of my vein. And sometimes I'm in the paddies, I'm picking rice by hand. And sometimes I'm in Cambodia, watching myself become an old man. Well, you know, I'd come on back to you, sister. You know I would. But I'm still missing, brother. Be there if I could. Well, you know, I'd come on back to you, Daddy. Oh, yes, I would. But I'm still missing much longer than I should. Now, sometimes I'm in the heartland of America, USA. You know my face, you know my name, but you ain't got a lot to say. And sometimes I was your lover, and you wonder where I've gone. Well, in my youth, you sent me to a place called Vietnam. Well, you know, I'd come on back to you people. Now, yes, I would. But I'm still missing. Be there if I could. Yes, you know, I'd come on back to you people. Yes, I would. But I'm still missing. I'd be there if I could.